right, the scripture for today is actually twice in Judges, exactly the same thing. Judges 17:6 and 21, verse 25. In those days, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So he put it in there twice, so I guess he wants us to realize that they were doing what was right in their own eyes. And maybe we can consider today and what things are happening today. People are doing what they feel is right in their own eyes. So maybe there's a lesson we can learn here. Our Book of Mysteries today, I've chosen page 303, and it's the Logos crucified. It was a cool desert night, and the sky above us was stunning in its clarity. Its deep black background made visible a vast multitude of stars, which in some places were so small and many that they fused into a white mist. The teacher was gazing upward as he spoke. In the beginning, he said, was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. Imagine that, he said. All things came into existence through the Word. The earth, the oceans, the moon, the sun, the stars, the galaxies, the universe itself, all came into being through the Word. And what is the Word, he asked? The Word of God, I replied. Yes, but in the original language, the word for word is logos. And logos also means cause. And of course, logos is Greek. He's not talking about Hebrew. So that'd be the New Testament. All things came into being through him, and the cause of all things. The logos caused the universe to come into existence. Therefore, the existence of the universe rests on the existence of the logos. And the teacher gazed at the ground and then up again at the sky. But the cosmos is fallen, he said, and the world is darkened by evil, and this life by sin. And the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us. The Logos became flesh and blood. Why? Because only that which is of flesh can die for our sins. Who died on the cross? The Messiah. The Messiah is the Logos. It was the Logos that died on the cross. The Logos was crucified. That means the Word was crucified. The cause of everything was crucified. And if the cause is crucified, nullified, then so too is the effect. The effect is nullified. It disappears. If the logo dies, the cosmos is nullified. The old world dies. The old life dies. The fallen past dies. The old you dies. And if the cause of existence is removed, then all the sins of your life are brought out of existence as if they never existed in the first place. So for all who are in Messiah, the old is gone, they become new, as it is written. If anyone is in Messiah, he's a new creation. The old has passed away, behold, the new is come. For the Logos has been crucified. So the mission today, the Logos has died, and with it, your old life. So stop letting the past affect you. Live free today in the newness and have no past. You know, it's...
Do you have a different edition than we do?
Why, does yours say something different?
Yeah.
What does your...
Mine was what she said.
What
I've
did...
noticed that a couple of times. That
Really? Well, I bought it at a different time. I don't know if it's second edition and you changed the wording. You've got the same thing?
I don't know.
Well,
Or maybe you ad-lib.
I try not to. Well, you know, point out the difference and we'll see what's going on. So anyway, but it just points out the fact that sometimes, you know, we continue to remember our past when we've asked for forgiveness. And if God forgets it, why shouldn't we put it in our past too? But that's just something that people tend to do. They just tend to keep thinking about their past and rerunning it, you know, instead of letting it go and yeah, and you know, and going forward instead of looking back. So.
Do you have this today, one of these?
No.
No, what I'm saying, do we have?
No, I left it at home. I'm sorry.
Okay, no.
So we'll just have to if you have anything you want to keep while you write the notes, I will try to bring it next week, try to remember it next week, so if you want them then. Our Hebrew word study today, I've chosen, and I put them on the board here. We're going to be looking at a man named Jephthah and his daughter. And of course, in Hebrew, there is no J sound, it's a Y sound. It's Jephthah. But I'll probably say Jephthah because that's our English pronunciation. But his name means to open, release, whom God sets free. And so we could look at that in several ways. Some people think his name was changed, after the battle. He won and he set the people free because he was their leader, their general. Others think maybe it had to do with his daughter and he released him from the vow. I don't know which it is. We don't know. It's a conundrum, to be sure. The next one is Micah, or Micah. We say Micah in English. And his name means, who is like God. Now, the last word here is debar. We've had that before, and it means word. Now, in Hebrew, there are two words for word. And one word means just strictly a word. And it's used once in the Bible. This is my word, okay? But debar has an extra meaning. It means an essence of something. And so I want to read out of God's secrets. Because before the Savior came, the ancient Jews commonly spoke of Messiah, and which is the Son of God, and they used the name of Debar, the Word. So in the New Testament, when Jesus is called the Word, when John calls him the Word, that was what was used for Messiah by the ancient Hebrews. So it helped them understand when John was saying the word. They already had that concept, which we kind of miss in the English. So let me read just a couple of paragraphs off of this.
What page are you in?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to look it up.
Okay.
It's, you can help me.
Is it under debar or is
It's
it
under,
under the word?
it's under word. Word. Here it is. Page 84, 85. Now, if you remember anything about the Hebrew Bible, the B sound and the D, the B and the D have a common sound almost, and it's interchangeable, and it's just like this word. Sometimes it's spelled debar, and sometimes it's spelled with a V, devar. It makes me think when I was taking classes in Spanish, they have the same type of thing where it's kind of a soft sound, and they almost combine the sound together. So, it's...
Well, if you're looking at that with the dot in the middle and the T on the bottom, from the neat codes, that is a ba sound.
Yeah. But in here, it's D-A-V-A-R in the book here. In other places, it's debar. So they use it. It's just kind of interchangeable. Okay, let me read this. The works here with both meanings, meaning both of the words. Let me see what the other word. Mila is the other word for word, but it just means word. This one has a deeper meaning, debar. Debar may also mean an essence in the sense of being or existence, especially when attempting to describe an exalted or abstract concept. With no attempt to challenge a canon of Christianity, the concept of Jesus being the living word, as we see in John 1:1, debar, would not have been construed that way if the reader of the Hebrew verse had not been introduced to the living word concept beforehand. For this reader, devar in this context would be perceived in its natural, logical Hebrew meaning and essence. The reader would understand from this verse that a man, John, is attempting here to describe divinity. The reader, who is also a man or woman, knows that it's almost impossible to describe divinity with ordinary human words, and therefore very likely to understand the word devar as essence because of the natural absence of precise human vocabulary for divinity. While devar has two meanings, as discussed here, mila has only one, word. The interesting question is why this make no mistake word wasn't used in John 1:1.
Right?
Right. So we miss so many of these things if we don't really understand the depths of the Hebrew. You know, we're going to get the general idea. You know, I'm not saying that there's anything left out that way, but when you want to get that deeper understanding, why knowing a little bit of Hebrew really does open the door for that. So I think it's really good. Okay, we're going to do chapter 11 today. We're going to be looking at the last half of Judges. I'm saving Delilah for next week because that is going to be,
Here, Jackie.
that's going to be, now. I must say that this last half of the ladies that we're going to be looking at really had some terrible lives. You know, we can be so grateful for Messiah who came and changed, you know, so much of how women are treated. And so we just need to be thankful because, and of course, in so many countries, pagan countries, all throughout the world, you know, women are degraded. But as we look at Judges, we see they started out pretty good, you know. They started out with godly leaders, and within the 300 or 400 years that, you know, that we're studying, it went downhill to such a way that they were living like pagans. And so it's just really heart-wrenching to read these things. It's not going to be a fun thing today, I'm sorry, but it really opens up to what was going on at the time. We know that they were living just like sheep without a shepherd at this time. After Joshua died, they would just kind of drift off the way, whatever way they wanted to live, and get into trouble, and then they would cry out to God and repent, and God would send a leader. This happened 13 times throughout this time. And so this man we're going to look at today was the 9th judge, and that's Jephthah. So let's start in 11 of Judges. And we're going to read 1 through 3 here. Now, Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor. Remember, we studied the man of valor, Caid, and what that meant. And but he was the son of a harlot. And Gilead begot Jephthah. So his mother was a harlot. Gilead's wife bore sons. Now, because he's listed first, it's very possible he was the first child of his father. And so he would have inherited. And remember Leviticus. Leviticus stated that if a man had a son by a harlot, he was to get an inheritance also. He was not to be left out. So just to kind of set the pace here. And so his sons, when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you're the son of another woman." Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob, and worthless men abandoned together with Jephthah and went out raiding with him. So they pushed him out of the house. They didn't want to give him his inheritance. And obviously, to me, this was after his father passed away. I don't think that, because he was there, and, you know, why would his father allow that if he was still alive, or at least incapacitated? So they wanted his inheritance, and so they just got rid of him. They probably resented him being there. So he fled to the land of Tob. Now, we know that Toba means good, and that's what Tob, that's another one of those times when B and the V can be the same, used in the same word. So the land of Tob is the good land. So he took off there and he gathered up a bunch of worthless guys. Sound like a band of merry men, but kind of like Robin Hood. So they were out there raiding and taking things, and he evidently got a pretty good reputation for being a leader and having some power and doing all these things. So we'll continue on. It came to pass that the people of Ammon made war against Israel. And so it was when the people of Ammon made war against Israel, the leaders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, "Come and be our commander, that we may fight against the people of Ammon." Okay, so they ran him off, and now they need a leader. And they think, well, he's looks like a pretty good leader. He's been robbing and raiding and doing all sorts of things. He's a pretty tough guy, so let's get him. And so they went to find him and asked him that. I've got a map here so we can see where Ammon is. Get my brush out of here. Okay. Here we are, way up in here. That's Ammon. So I don't know, he would probably be over in this area. Oh, here's Gilead right here. So these people were attacking up in here. Okay. So now we got the area where they are.
Where is Jerusalem?
Jerusalem.
Oh, it's over there.
Jerusalem would be down here, but it's not Jerusalem yet.
No.
Okay, but that's where it would be. It would be. Yeah, last week we'll talk about that today. It's called Jebus right now. And the Jebusites lived there, and they were pagans at the time. And anyway, that's the area there. Okay, so he's asked to be their leader. How do you think he's going to feel about that? So Jephthah said to the leaders of Gilead, "I thought you hated me and expelled me from my father's house. Didn't you expel me from my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you're in trouble?" And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "Well, that's why we've turned again to you now, that you may go and fight against the people with us of Ammon and be our head over the inhabitants of Gilead." So they're saying, well, we want you to be our leader now and just be the head guy now, kind of like our governor or whatever, And so Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Well, if you take me back home to fight against the people of Ammon and the Lord delivers them to me, shall I be your head?" He wants a guarantee that they're not going to backtrack once he does this. And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord be a witness between us if we do not according to your words." Then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them, and Jephthah spoke all of the words before the Lord in Mizpah. So they had a big meeting, and he went ahead and he spoke out loud the vow with God as the witness. So he felt like that would put the pressure on him, Vows meant a lot to him, as we'll find out, as they should. So Jephthah sent messages to the king. So now he's in control and he's got his army and everything. But the first thing he does, he contacts the king of Ammon. And he says, "Why are you doing this to me? What's going on here? Why are you doing this, troubling me?" And the king said, "Well, because Israel took away my land when they came out of Egypt, from the Arnon as far as Jabbok to the Jordan, and therefore restore those lands peaceably." So he's saying, just give us our land back and everything will be good, But Jephthah,
Russia and Ukraine.
so often I'm thinking of the Palestinians and Israel. I mean, that's been their story for so long. You know, they've got their own story, but they don't face the facts. The real facts were they attacked Israel, and Israel took the land, because that's just the way it works. You don't give everybody back land, although Israel has done that in many cases. But in general, if you're attacked, you get their land if you win. So he's pretty much saying this at this time. So Jephthah reminded him that they tried to come in, you know, when they were going towards the promised land, and they asked just to go through it. And they said, we've got our own food and everything, just let us go through. And they said, no way. And so they went around. So, you know, God did not want them to fight with the Ammons or the Moabites, because they were kin. They were shirt-tail relations, so to speak. They all came from Abraham. So, but the Canaanites were the ones that they were to clean out. But Ammon and Moab were not good family people to them. They didn't treat them well, and so that's why, you know, eventually they're pretty much got wiped out. So he's reminding them of all of this, and he said, besides, then the time came, they had a war with the king of, I think it was king of Moab, and he had already taken some of the Ammonite land, but they defeated the king. It was Sihon, and when they defeated that king, then they got all the land, which included some of the Ammonite land, and that's why they were there. So they'd already lost it to the other king, but they wanted it back. And so he was reminding him, and he said, you know, all these years, you didn't say anything about it before, you know, you didn't try to get it back before. So he said, you know, you don't have any leg to stand on. And so they wouldn't accept it, so they went to war. So that's where it was then. So the king of Ammon, this goes down here further. The king would not heed. In like manner, they sent to the king of Moab, but he wouldn't consent. So Israel remained in Kadesh, and they went through the wilderness and bypassed the land of Edom and the land of Moab. Sorry. This is just reviewing what the children did before. Let me scoot down there, because I didn't want to go through all of that. Let me look here for a minute. Let's go down to 27. So he's still talking to the king, you know, and this is the final thing. He said, therefore I have not sinned against you, but you wronged me by fighting against me. May the Lord, the judge, render judgment this day between the children of Israel and the people of Ammon. So here he's declaring that he's going to do this. However, the king of the people of Ammon did not heed the words which Jephthah said. And then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, and passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he advanced toward the people of Ammon. And he made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then it will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the people of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Now that was really a dumb thing to say. Why? Why did he do that? Nobody knows why he did it. Possibly, you know, he was living in a pagan culture all around him, and I think he'd lost some of that guidance that was there for the Lord to give him, you know, and he wanted reassurance. He didn't completely trust the Lord to do this. He wanted some extra insurance, I guess, and maybe he felt like that vow would be the extra insurance. This is just, you know, my thoughts. Whatever the case, he made that crazy vow, and vows are important to him, as they are. I don't see any need to make a vow like that at all, but people will do these things. Even today, people will say, if you just do this for me, I'll do this, you know, and then they rarely follow through with it, you know. If you're going to make a vow like that, you should keep it, and you better think about it before you even do make a vow. Highlight. And so here we go now with this. So he advanced toward the people of Ammon to fight them, and the Lord delivered them into his hands, and he defeated them from Aroer as far as Minnith, 20 cities. So he conquered 20 cities, and to Abel Carmine with a very great slaughter. Thus the people of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. Now, you know, it just seems so silly that that the king would not go along with this. He just lost a lot of people. It's just, but he didn't expect that. He expected to win, of course. But war is just, I don't know, it's just so hard to understand. So when Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing, and she was his only child. Can you imagine? He comes home victorious, and if you remember David when he fought his battles, the women came out with tambourines and they praised him and all. And remember Miriam, she praised the Lord because it was the Lord that really won the battle, with the Red Sea. With the Egyptians. So that was a thing that was our women's participation in a battle. When the men came home victorious, they lavished a lot of praise on them and celebration time and everything. And so this was his daughter coming out to meet her victorious father, and wow, and he sees her come out. What a tragic thing. And it says she was his only child. And besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. In Hebrew, it says, let me get it here. She was his darling, his only darling. It's just a beautiful thing. His beloved darling. Yakid, it means beloved darling. And that's sad. And so,
Makes you wonder who he thought would come out of the house.
yeah,
That's what I kept.
yeah.
Did he think an animal? I thought the dog.
A servant.
Sheep or goat or
A servant, maybe, he was willing to sacrifice somebody or something, it seemed so crazy. But it came to pass when he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you brought me very low. You're among those who trouble me, for I've given my word to the Lord and I can't go back on it." So who does he blame? In his grief. And so often people do these things. In their grief, they will blame the victim instead of the perpetrator, which he was. And so it's just a really tragic thing to have that happen. But he says, "You brought me to my knees." And it's just an awful thing. So in verse 36, she said to him, "My father, if you've given your word to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, because the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the people of Ammon." And she said to her father, "Let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go and wander on the mountains and bewail my virginity, my friends and I." And so he said, "Go." And he sent her away for 2 months, and she with her friends, and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. And so it was at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he carried out his vow with her, which he had vowed, and she knew no man. And it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went 4 days each year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. So the question is, did he sacrifice her, or did she just remain a virgin? There's two sides,
Hopefully she just remained.
We want to believe she remained alive and she was just perpetually a virgin, the rest of her life. I don't know.
Because in those days, that would be very bad not to marry and have
Yes,
children.
yes, and he would never have grandchildren.
And he would not be able to carry his name on in any way.
Leviticus 8:21 forbids human sacrifice, but he has gone kind of far away from the Lord. He still has a concept of the Lord and wants to serve him, but he's not where he should be. And he's been living with the pagans, and he's kind of developed. And pagan sacrifice did it all the time. Human sacrifice was just a common thing. So,
But But she doesn't say, give me 2 months because I'm going to die. She says, give me 2 months because I'll never marry.
Yeah,
So to
but if
me-
she's dead, she'll never marry.
Yeah, but it makes you wonder if maybe it wasn't the fact that she was gonna be a perpetual virgin because of the, I mean, I think if I was gonna be killed, I wouldn't be worried about whether I'm gonna marry or not. I'd be worried about whether I'm gonna live or not. You know, I'm gonna die. Give me 2 months because I'm gonna die. Give me 2 months because I'm gonna be a virgin the rest of my life.
But it does say he carried out his vow. So there's the other side of it. And we just really don't know.
There's no history of this person.
Um,
And they celebrate it.
Maybe they
Yeah,
celebrated
they do.
because he didn't kill her.
Like the daughters of Israel went yearly to lament
Yes.
the daughter.
They're lamenting, they're not celebrating.
It became a,
To
Yeah,
never
yeah,
marry the daughter.
yeah. So,
But it was a real bad thing not to marry, right?
yes,
I mean, that was like,
yes,
you were not blessed, you were cursed almost.
yeah,
what
yeah.
does bewailed her virginity upon the mountains?
The-
It's like,
be-
she took her friends and they went out and had a party for
No,
2 weeks.
bewailing was just,
It's like when you break up with
Sad.
somebody and you go have ice cream.
Like
I don't think
sackcloth and
so.
ashes.
yeah, I don't think there was anything very happy.
Cry with each other.
Bewailing is crying, just weeping and crying.
No, cause it was like when it was reading, it was them going, they're out there partying.
I don't think it was a party.
No, I think so.
Well, Chuck Smith, I've always enjoyed his teaching, and he's really right on the line. But he has the viewpoint that he killed her, that he sacrificed her.
He probably did.
Because he
And
kept
she
his
would have
vow.
been- if that's her daddy and they're so close, she would have been around pagan sacrifices and understood that. It wouldn't have been a foreign concept to her.
Yeah,
But this doesn't say he even told her what the vow was. She just said, let it be done as you vow. Well, what did
Yeah.
It doesn't say he told her, this is my vow. He could have vowed that he was gonna fast for 40, he could have vowed anything. So it kind of, there's a piece missing in
Yeah.
there where he had to have told her this was my vow,
he probably did because,
But at
Well,
the end,
he
he
said
said
it
he
was
did.
a burnt offering.
but I
Well, no, told it.
I found another fellow that I really appreciate his teaching, and he really gets in deeper than Chuck Smith did into the Hebrew. And so, let me read what he wrote. I believe he didn't violate God's specific commandment, thou shalt not kill. I take a view supported by many Hebrew commentators that concluded the phrase Judges 3:11 may I will offer it up instead of a burnt offering. So he's saying that maybe that word was there instead of a burnt offering in Hebrew.
Yeah, because we wouldn't know. They have so much more.
Actually, what he had done was to sacrifice his desire for grandchildren, her desire to bear children. She was then dedicated to the Lord, and this satisfied his vow. Her virginity, a substitute for a burnt offering, is verified by the following verse. He said, go. He sent her away for 2 months, and she went with her companions, bewailed her virginity upon the mountains. And it came to pass at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed, and she knew no man. It was a custom of Israel 40 that the daughters of Israel went yearly to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in a year. And what these women commemorated was her inability to bear children, not sacrificial death. In verse 40, the word lament should be translated to celebrate. So there you go. As the Lord would not permit Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, he would never have permitted the righteous Jephthah to sacrifice his daughter. So,
Makes sense. doesn't it?
so I just still don't know. We
That
just,
does.
yeah.
That's
They
the way
each
he explains it.
they each have a good case.
Oh, no.
I'd hate to be the judge.
Sandra?
Yes.
In Hebrews 11:32, it lists him as one of heroes of faith.
Yeah. Well, he was one of the judges, and
So
God.
he clearly did whatever it was that he vowed
Whatever.
to the Lord. So
But let me read you Jeremiah 7:31, which I got a little emotional with the last part of it, I have to say.
Jeremiah what?
Jeremiah 7:31. And then they built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of Hinnom, to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my heart. In other words, it never even crossed the Lord's mind
Right,
for human sacrifice.
right.
I mean, that just,
And you know what? What do we say? And God always forgives us. We say stuff.
yeah.
And so he might have, you know, God knew his heart. He knew what he was saying in his heart, you know.
So I don't know. I don't know if you know what Tophet means. It's where they sacrificed. They would put Molech out, and then they would burn their children alive to the idol, to that god.
How could that be pleasing?
And this was not pleasing to God.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so why would he let him burn his daughter on the altar? I can't imagine that would be pleasing to God.
No,
That would be
no.
supporting the pagan
Yeah.
rituals.
And they would do this just outside of Jerusalem in the valley, the Kidron Valley, just that runs right there. And they called it the Valley of Hinnom. And it was a dump. It burned eternally, an eternal fire, because it was just
Trash.
burning and probably bodies. I mean, it's just
That place?
the Valley of Hinnom. When you read about the Valley of Hinnom, it's the Kidron Valley down just outside of the gates of Jerusalem. And when they had turned to pagan ways, why they were doing that right there.
Well, that's why God destroyed some of those cultures, or told the Israelites to destroy
Yes.
them, because they sacrificed their children.
Absolutely, but they didn't. They did not. That's the whole problem. They did not clear out everybody, and they infiltrated through the families and brought their pagan gods and everything in there. And that's what we're seeing here in Judges. That's why the society, the culture, is being degraded into a pagan world.
Then you look at our world and abortion, how many years has that been going
We
on?
have nothing
Over 50
on them, do we?
50, over 50 years.
And I just sit here and think, if it weren't for the salt of the earth,
America's had probably 55 million abortions by now. I worked for
I know.
Right to Life, the state office, for 4 years, and the rallies we went to then, they had like 53 million abortions that they had been done.
and
It's like
and
60, isn't it?
the wrath of God would already have been here.
Oh,
It
yeah.
wouldn't be for us Christians,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
like Abraham said, was it Abraham that said, if there's just one righteous, if there's just 10 righteous, don't destroy the city.
Yeah.
And so,
Mhm.
because of us,
Mhm.
and we gotta keep standing.
Absolutely. Janie.
Well, the body of Christ is what holds the evil one back.
Right, the salt of the earth, we are the salt of the earth.
My question is, how do you pronounce his name? That's number one.
Jephthah.
Japheth. Is he in the line of Japheth?
I'd have.
There's only 3 lines, Ham, Shem, Japheth. They all come from that lineage.
Well,
And I'm just curious where.
he
is
would
that-
he would be from Shem because he was an Israelite,
He'd be from
but
Shem.
he had a harlot for a mother,
Right.
so
Got it. Okay.
we don't know where she came from.
Okay. Thank you.
Probably a pagan, but we don't know.
Mhm.
We don't know. Okay, well, that really is a disturbing section, but it gets worse from here, so
Oh, thanks, Sandra.
Is it Ham?
I
Is it
just
Ham
wanna-
or Shem? Ham.
Ham.
That makes a lot of sense.
No.
That makes a lot of sense.
No, I say Shem
You say
because,
Shem?
well, he's an Israelite.
Okay.
He's an
I'm
Israelite.
just trying to.
See, he
it's a
was,
lot to-
yeah, he was a
but-
judge. He was an Israelite judge. Out of 13, he was the 9th.
Okay, so Shem.
Yes, Shem.
And
Okay.
then Terah, Abraham, Hagar, Ishmael, that line.
Okay, now we're going to go on to chapter 17. We're going to skip over Delilah for next week and see. And by the way, Samson was the last judge. He was the 13th judge, and he's introduced in chapter 13. I thought that was kind of interesting how the numbers work out that way. Okay, this is a story about, I'm going to just call him Micah. Now there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And this was an Israelite, but this is how their society had gone downhill. He said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears," in other words, he heard her say it, "here's the silver with me. I took it." So he's admitting he's the thief. He took her money, and she'd put a curse on it. She said, whoever took this money, I'm putting a curse on you. And so I guess it made him a little nervous when he heard that. So he gave it back to her. And his mother said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my son." Is she trying to make it all better? I don't know. So when he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, "I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son, to make a carved image and a molten image. Now therefore, I'll return it to you." So she gave it back to him. "I was just saving it for you anyway because I was going to make an idol for you." Wonderful family here. Okay, now according to Chuck Smith, he believes that they did believe in God, but now they'd reached the point where they had to have an idol in order to represent God. They couldn't believe in an invisible God. They had to have something tangible. And, we know people today that, have the same idea.
Money, it'll do it.
Well, money, they used the money, and then some of it was melted down, probably paid for it too. So she returned the silver, and then his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. So now he's got his little idol. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and a household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. So he's got his own little setup going there in his own house. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, the family of Judah, and he was a Levite. And he was staying there. And the man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. For some reason, he left his home, and he's out wandering around, doesn't know where to go. And he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, "Well, where do you come from?" And he said, "Well, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm on my way to find a place to stay." And Micah said to him, "Well, dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me. And I'll give you 10 shekels of silver per year and a suit of clothes and your sustenance." So the Levite came in. So he was bought and paid for. Now he's living in this guy's house. That is not what a Levite was supposed to be doing. So the Levite went in, and he was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. And then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me since I have a Levite as a priest." Okay.
Get one of those in our house.
So the priest sold himself, and now Micah's into works. He thinks that he can buy his way into God. So now, let's go to chapter 18. In those days there was no king in Israel, no leader, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. Now they were down in here. I don't know. I still don't have a good map for where it is, but they were kind of in this area.
Tribe of Dan?
Yeah, the tribe of Dan was right in here, and they weren't very successful with the Canaanites. They were having a tough time getting rid of them. And so they kind of thought, well, there might be a better place, And they wanted a little more land. Maybe they weren't happy with their land. They were discontent. So they're wanting to move to a different area. So that's what's going on. And so until that day, their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. And they said to them, "Go search the land." And so they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. And while they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. And he turned aside and said to them, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you do here?" And he said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me. He's hired me, and I've become his priest." And so they said to him, "Please inquire of God that we may know whether the journey on which we go will prosper." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The presence of the Lord will be with you on your way." I don't know if I would trust a situation like that, but they, he's a priest, and he was one of theirs. He came from their area, so. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish, and they saw the people who were there, and they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure, and there were no rulers in the land that might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. And so it looked like easy pickings for them. They were living peacefully there, and they thought, well, they can just go in and take the land. Okay, so the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and the brethren said, "What's your report?" And they said, "Arise, let's go up against them. We've seen the land, and it's very good. Would you do nothing? Don't hesitate to go and enter and possess the land. When you go, you'll come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into our hands, a place where there's no lack of anything that is on the earth." And so 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, armed with weapons of war, and they went up and encamped at Kirath Yearim in Judah. There they call that place Manahadan to this day. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. So they're back again. He was a welcoming type of guy, and so they were staying there. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to the brethren, "Do you know that there are in those houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molded image? Now therefore consider what you should do." So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. And the 600 men, armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate, and the 5 men who had gone out to spy the land went up. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. And the priest stood at the entrance of the gate of the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. And these went into Micah's house and took the carved image and all. And the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet, put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. Isn't it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or to be a priest of a tribe and a family of Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad. And he took the ephod and the household idols and the carved image and took his place among the people. So he was willing to sell out to the highest bidder. It sounded even better to him. And they turned and departed and put the little ones, the livestock, the goods in front of them. And they were a good way from the house of Micah. The men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. So he found out he'd been robbed, and so he gathered all his neighbors together in a posse and went after him. And they turned around when they saw him and said, "What ails you that you gathered such a company?" And he said, "You've taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you've gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, what ails you?" And the children of Dan said to him, "Don't let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way. He found that there was too much for him to handle. And so he saw they were too strong, and he turned and went back to his house and gave up. So he's lost all of his stuff, all his gods, and his priest.
Yeah, he wrote daughter stories now.
So all of that money that his mom saved up went to naught. So that's his story there. So the Danites, the tribe of Dan, weren't such good people for a while there, were they? They left the land that God gave them, and now they're up here. And there is the city of Dan. Let's see if I can find it up in here. You see it?
Straight up.
Straight up.
Down further.
Oh, way up. Yeah, way up there. So they had gone way up into that area.
This said they set the idols up for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, they
They weren't very righteous.
they took all of them. They set up their own place, and he.
Plus they had a priest.
Well, they, you know,
They were blending their idolatry with the Levitical order. With the
yeah,
law.
and you know, the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle was set up in Shiloh, down in here, and it was there for almost 400 years, all during this time. But they set up their own little idol place there because they said it's just too far to go. So that's kind of what they were wanting to do. Okay, so let me see here.
But there's a difference in the Ark of the Covenant and there.
Yeah, a big difference, a big difference. So they had their own little worship area, and because they said it was so far. So let's go to 19 now, and this is another tragic story. How women were treated. It just kind of goes from bad to horrible. It came to pass in those days there was no king in Israel. He keeps reiterating that because they have no leader. They're those sheep without a shepherd. That's their problem. You know, God wanted to be their king, wanted to be their leader, but they lost track. And there was a certain Levite staying in a remote mountains of Ephraim, and he took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. So now he's got a concubine. And Chuck Smith kind of called this like a live-in. He said it's like today, you know, just people living together. That's the way he looked at it anyway. It's kind of a lower, she was considered a wife, but a very low-level wife. You know, if he'd married her, why, she would have been a great standing in the family, but a concubine didn't have a lot of rights. So that's kind of the way I see it. So he's got this, and for a priest to do this, you know, this is really not right. So he took for himself this concubine, and but she played the harlot against him and went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah and was there for 4 months. So we don't know why she left. We don't know why she did that. Maybe he wasn't good to her. We don't know. She did it. She shouldn't have done it, but she did it. Okay, and then she went on to back to her dad's house. Then her husband arose and went after her. And he decided to take this kid, and he was going to sweet talk her and get her back. And so he got there, and he met his father-in-law, and he kind of liked him. They had things in common. They talked and drank and talked and drank some more, and so I think he kind of talked his daughter into going back to him. That's inferred. I don't know if that's the case or not, but she is going back with him. And they were going to leave, and the father says, oh, stay a while and have another drink. And then it got late, so he spent the night, and then it happened again the next day. Finally, in the middle of the day, the priest said, well, I just got to get back. Just got to get back. And so they left, and he'd had his servant with him and his concubine. He had brought the donkey for the concubine, and I guess, and so they were taking off, and they didn't have time to get back home because they left so late. And so he was going through the area, and he came to the area of what is now Jerusalem, where the Jebusites were, and they were gonna the servant suggested they go there, and he said, no, I don't want to stay in a pagan. I want to stay, with some Israelites. And so he came to this certain area. Now let me catch up to my notes here and see where I am in the Bible after talking all that. Let's see, I think it's in 16. Well, let's see, 12 here. Verse 19, chapter 19. But his master said to him, won't turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not the children of Israel. We'll go on to Gibeah. And so he said to his servant, come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or in Ramah. And they passed by their way, and the sun went down near Gibeah, which belonged to Benjamin. So this is the area of the Benjamites. And they turned there to go into lodge. And when they went in, they sat in the open square in the city, but no one offered to take them in for the night, to spend the night, as that was the thing to do. You go there and somebody'd walk by and say, well, come and stay with us, and it just didn't happen. Just then an old man came from his work in the field, who was also from the mountains of Ephraim, and he was staying in Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. So when he raised his eyes, he saw the travelers in the square, and he said, where are you going and where you come from? And then I'm going to skip on down here. He found out they were from the same area, and he said, oh, come stay with me. So he said, peace be with you. However, let all your needs be my responsibility, and don't spend the night in the open square. So he brought him into his house, gave fodder to the donkeys, and he washed their feet and ate and drank. And as they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. Now, does this make you think of anything? And they spoke to the master of the house, to the old man, saying, bring the men out that came to your house, that we may know them carnally. But the man, master of the house, went out to them and said, no, my brethren, I beg you, don't act so wickedly. Seeing this man has come into my house, don't commit this outrage. Look, here's my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now. Humble them and do with them as you please. But to this man don't do such a vile thing. But the men would not heed him. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them, and he knew her and abused her all night long and until morning. And when the day broke, they let her go. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was till it was light. And when master rose in the morning and opened the door of the house and went out his way, there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, get up and let's get going. So compassionate. And there was no answer. So the man lifted her on the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. So there she was, dead. She'd been gang raped. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And so it was that all who saw it, no such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up. So he sent them a shocking message. And it was shocking. But he put a message with each piece of her body, as he sent one to each tribe, one piece to each of the tribes. So remember who did this. These were the Benjamites, the tribe of Benjamin, who did it. And so they got all riled up over that. They were incensed at what had happened. So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba. And that's really a phrase that they even use today, from Dan to Beersheba, because Dan is way up there at the top and Beersheba is way down here. So everybody came out. They sent representatives to the congregation and gathered all in one spot, all the tribes. And 400 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up there, so they're aware of what's going on. And the children of Israel said, tell us, how did this wicked thing happen? And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, my concubine and I went to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And then, of course, he continues on about what all happened. So I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. Look, all of you children of Israel, give your advice and counsel here and now. So all the people arose as one man, saying, none of us will go to his tent, nor will any turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we'll do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000, and make provisions for the people, and when they come to Gibeah in Benjamin, they may repay all the vileness that they've done in Israel. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united together as one. So now we've got civil war. So then the tribes of Israel sent men throughout Benjamin, saying, what is this wickedness that occurred to men? Deliver up the men, the perverted men, and that we may put them to death and remove the evil. But the children of Benjamin wouldn't listen, and they said, come and get them. So now we've got war. We've got a civil war. And so they pretty much cleaned out the Benjamites. It was, it started out, they said, well, who's going to lead the battle? And the Lord said, Judah. And of course, that was the thing that God said, even I think in Exodus, you know, when he was saying Judah goes first. The Levites carry the ark, you know, into battle usually, and then the Judah leads all the men. They're the first tribe. So Judah goes first. So they rose in the morning and they camped, and the Benjamites were really tough warriors, and they had hard time conquering them, and it looked like they were losing for quite a while. They lost a lot of men throughout the battle, but finally they cried out to the Lord, and they you know, they'd been wiped out. The Benjamites had just wiped them out, and so they called on the Lord, and they said, please help us, Lord, you know, and they repented, and God said, okay, I'm going to give the battle to you now. And so it turned then, and they were able to ambush the Benjamites, and they wiped almost the whole bunch of them out, except for I think it was 600 were left. They ran up into the hills and to the rock and hid out up there, and they were able to save themselves, and they couldn't get them. So they were the only ones left, but they cleaned out all the people pretty much. And so we're going to skip down a little bit.
25,000 Benjamite fell, all of them valiant fighters.
Yeah, just in that one. It was just crazy, all of that, just because of that one act, you know. But they went in and they killed all the women and children and everything, you know. They wiped out the women. And so, let me get down to here. Let's see here. Let's do 21.
Well, they don't even list the women. Mine, it just says the men of Israel went back to Benjamin, put all the towns to the sword, including the animals. Doesn't even list women and children as being worthy
Yeah.
of mention, I guess.
Well, we'll find out in a minute, because they're worried about the tribe disappearing because there are no women. Okay, 1 through 3 and 21. Now the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. So they already said that they're not going to let them have any of their women anymore, you know, to marry. But now the people came to the house of God and remained there before God till evening, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly and said, Lord God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? So now they're worried that Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, is just going to disappear. And then there'd be 11 tribes instead of 12. And they didn't want that. So one bad move leads to another bad thing until now they're worried, what are they going to do? And they probably already made the vow they're not going to let their wives or their girls marry them. So where are they going to get these women? So it came to pass the next morning that the people rose early and built an altar and offered peace offerings. And the children of Israel said, who is there among us, all the tribes of Israel, who didn't come up with the assembly of the Lord? Now this is when they decided to go against Benjamin. They said, everybody's going to go, you know, everybody's going to send men. And so somebody came up with this idea, well, was there anybody that didn't go and fight? And so after all the searching, they found there was one town that didn't send anybody. Okay, they've got a plan now. But, let's see. They had made, I'm going to go down to 6 here, but I'm going to start up part of 5. For they had made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, "He shall surely be put to death." And the children of Israel grieved for Benjamin their brother, and said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for wives for those who remain, seeing we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters as wives?" And they said, "What is one there of the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Mizpah to the Lord?" And in fact, no one had come from the camp of Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent out there 12,000 of their most valiant men, and commanded them, "Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead to the edge of the sword, including the women and children. And this is a thing you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male, every woman who has known a man intimately." So they're going to kill every man and woman, and then they're going to take any of the girls, the young girls that haven't married. So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan.
I wonder what the test of virginity was back then.
Age, probably.
12 to 15, maybe.
Yeah, probably younger rather than older. Yeah, 12, 13, 14 at the most. But that whole city was destroyed because of that. It just one thing after another, just one bad choice after another.
Well, and the women and children had no choice in whether the man from that city went to join the party.
It just makes no sense, you know. But this is their solution. It's just heartbreaking when you read it. So now they've got that, but the problem was there were still more men. They still needed a few more. So they've got to come up with another plan to get a few more wives. And so they decide that for the celebration that comes up every year, the young girls would come out around Shiloh, and they would celebrate and dance. And so they're going to allow the extra guys that don't have wives to hide out, and then they spot a girl that they like, they can grab her. So that was their final solution there for them to have wives, and so that's what they did.
Go and hide in the vineyards and watch.
So I guess they figured, well, we did it now. So that is the way the book of Judges ends. It's just complete chaos.
Yeah, like turning a blind eye to these Benjamite men who are stealing these young girls. They just turned a blind eye.
Isn't Benjamin not in the line of the Messiah? Or is it in the New Testament, something like
Well,
Benjamin?
Judah's in the line of
Yeah,
Messiah.
but there's something, Benjamin is not in the list. Isn't that John?
Might be Dan. Dan's left out an awful lot, but there are several lists throughout the Bible, and every so often it's one tribe is left out for some reason.
But this goes to show too that you do everything that's right in your own eyes.
Yes.
And you don't seek God to help you, then this is what happens.
Yes, it just complete chaos, you know. It's just awful. And so the very last verse, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that just sums up the whole thing. It's just tragic. But even in pagan countries, and even in this time, God had his men, and God could read your heart, and if you had a heart to know God, he reached out to you. It didn't matter where you lived or what system you're living under. And so next week we're going to read about Samson, and then after that we're going to go to the book of Ruth, and she came out of that same time period, and Boaz, and what a godly man he is. And so there were godly men, even though we don't find very many of them in Judges. So